What is going on, everybody? I am back today because the Black Phone 2 is releasing very soon, and it got me thinking about horror movie sequels, and not just any horror movie sequels in particular. And this is not insinuating anything about the Black Phone 2. It got me thinking about how throughout the years, if you've become a fan of a larger horror property throughout your life, they've probably attempted to make a sequel of it, especially if it's more of a big budget film. And horror sequels have existed for as long as the genre has been around. And it really got me thinking about horror movie sequels that I feel like get a little bit too much hate. These are movies in long-standing horror franchises that I feel like get way too like dunked on, that I feel like at the time period that they were released, maybe people just didn't understand them or appreciate them in the way that they're supposed to be. And so this video could piss off some people today. I don't really care. I think that it's fun to talk about these subjects. And so today I'm going to give you some films in long-standing horror franchises that I feel like don't necessarily deserve the hate that they are given. And I'm not by any means saying that any of these films are perfect, but I feel like in the franchises that they exist in, they're really not as bad as people want them to be. And I'm going to jump into that right now and talk about some of these. So first up, we're going to go into one of my favorite horror franchises, and that is the Child's Play franchise. And we are going to talk about the film Seed of Chucky. I still think that this is one of the most overhated films in any horror franchise for no particular reason other than people didn't like it that Don went for a straightforward comedy in this. It definitely has its dark, violent edge. It's nowhere near the same type of slasher format that Chucky has been throughout the entirety of the franchise. But I feel like Bride of Chucky really sort of established a film that was going in this type of a direction. And I think the societal commentary that exists in this movie was definitely way ahead of its time, especially considering Chucky has a non-binary child. And some of the conversations surrounding familial dynamics and things of that nature in this movie, while they're overtly comical, they're also very thoughtful. And I think the movie is really genuinely funny. There's a phenomenal John Waters cameo in this film. There's just a lot of really great things going for it. It has great atmosphere. I like the way the thing's shot. I think it's very playful and fun. And while it's not my favorite film in the Child's Play franchise, I still really enjoy it a lot. And I think the unnecessary hate for this movie stems from the fact that people weren't ready for an overblown comedy, let alone the fact that it was tackling some of the subject matter that it did at the time period that it was released. I just think that it's super fun. I have a great time revisiting it every time I get around to this movie in the franchise. Next is Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. This is one of the most hated films in the entire franchise, and I'm not 100% sure why, because I feel like this follows the Friday the 13th formula in a way that's incredibly entertaining. I know there's a lot of people that are upset that at the end of this movie that it wasn't Jason. One of the things that I think makes the Friday the 13th film so entertaining is that they follow a very specific formula, which is you get a group of people together that have extreme personalities. Lots of times they are very like stereotypical personas of people. And that's what makes them so very enjoyable to watch. And I think this movie does it to the most extreme degree. Where one of my favorite characters in the film, or group of characters, is the couple that sort of resembles the characters from Wild at Heart. It's like a really hilarious at that diner, at that specific scene. And there are so many characters in this movie that I just think make it so very enjoyable. It doesn't ever take itself too seriously. I know there's a lot of people that get upset in this movie that some of the kills take place off screen, which I think a lot of that has to do with New Line Cinema and the way that they like approach this. They wanted the rating not to go too extreme, and so they kept some of the more violent elements out of the film. But I think some of the grotesque, more violent deaths that they show work really well, and I think it still has great atmosphere. I think the movie does a great job being a fun slasher film while also just adding some really great characters. The damn enchilada scene is still one of my favorite scenes in any horror movie, period. One of my favorite moments from the Friday the 13th series as a whole. And I think this movie gets a really bad rap for no particular reason. I have a lot of fun with it, and it's always one that I recommend watching with a large group of people because it's just really entertaining to laugh at. Up next, and this one might not be as hot take of an opinion, but it's a Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. My favorite film in the entire franchise is 3, but this is really close. And I think what I like so much about this movie, and there's some people that complain that the third film has really great emotional attachment to the characters, and I do agree with that. I think the third film is the strongest film in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise because of its character building, because of how incredible and elaborate the set pieces and the kills are in the movie. There's just a lot of really great things going for it. You have Patricia Arquette's really phenomenal performance at a young age in that film. And this movie kind of throws all the character building to the wayside. But what I love so much about 4 is the elaborate death sequences in this. I feel like this is some of the most creative kills in the entire franchise. It's so vibrant and vivid and really anytime Freddy is going after one of these people, it's like really intense and I love it. And I also think Robert Englund's performance in this, along with 3, is some of the most unhinged in the entire franchise. He's really going for that delicate balance of like extreme psychopath versus just like being hilarious. And I love that. I think that's what makes his character so incredibly entertaining. And I think this movie stacks up with the best of the best in the franchise. I'm not sure why people don't like this movie as much. This isn't necessarily nearly as hated as some of the films I've talked about early in the video, but I still think this movie deserves a heck of a lot more love than it receives. Up next is Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. I do not like the Halloween franchise. I think Halloween as a whole, if Halloween 1 was a standalone movie and they would have made Halloween 3 as like a separate thing, I love both of those films. I could not care less about Michael Myers as a character. I don't think that he's interesting. I don't think his backstory is interesting. And I feel like what they did to this franchise was a complete and utter disaster. The movies just progressively get worse and worse as the franchise goes on. And I don't particularly by any means find this film to be excellent, but what I do find about this film is for it to be wildly entertaining. It is stupid, it is over the top. They try to add like this hokey comedic side with the two police officers in the film that's just so out of left field. And for a franchise that by this point was becoming completely and totally stale, I am 100% okay with a filmmaker trying to go a completely and totally different direction. There are a lot of people that love Halloween 4, and I think that movie is a boring mess. I cannot stand it. I do not care about any of the characters. I don't think it captures the essence of the original film in a way that works at all. This movie at least takes a swing for that, and it also has way more memorable scenes than the 4. I can't remember anything hardly about the 4th movie, but the scene in this film where there's the chase through the air ducts in the house is like one of the better scenes in the later installments of the Halloween films. I really have a fun time with this every time I revisit it. The mask looks kind of stupid. There's like a lot of little nitpicky things I could have with it because it's not a perfect movie by any means, but I think it's better than a lot of the later installments in this franchise. And I think a lot of people just hate on it because the tone is a little all over the place, but I really appreciate it for what it is. Up next is Scream 2, and I feel like over the years, the hatred of this movie, or sort of the kind of apathetic nature that people have towards it, has always been kind of a surprise for me. I'm not really sure why people are so kind of like tepid with their reaction to this film. I feel like this really just emulates everything that makes the first film really special and just does it in a way that's uniquely entertaining and engaging. I love all of the characters in this. I love the setting on the college campus. I think it's very suspenseful. I think the twist at the end of the movie is really great. I think Wes Craven kind of takes everything that he did in the first film and just elevates it to the most extreme way possible. I always have a lot of fun revisiting this, and I'm not sure why a lot of people find this movie to be so weak in the franchise. I think it's really great, and it's one that I always look forward to revisiting. Up next is Saw 3D, a movie that was pretty much critically hated and hated by the fan base when it came out. A couple of years ago, I went through and watched every single film in the Saw franchise. And when I got to this one, I was like, just like, oh my God, I have no desire to watch this movie at all. And this movie is complete and utter schlock in the greatest way possible. One of the things about the Saw franchise that I just don't understand that people don't get is they feel like a violent soap opera. The drama is so ridiculous. The plot twists feel like something off of a daytime soap opera. Just absolutely ridiculous and unhinged unhinged, nonsensical. People die and come back to life left and right. And this movie, I think, does the perfect job bringing back all of the silly, stupid shit that I love with the Saw franchise. The kills are just ridiculous and over the top and violent. The performances are as hokey and over the top as every other one of the films in the franchise. I have a lot of fun with it. I think it tonally captures all of the things that I really appreciate with the other films in the franchise. And I'm not sure why people hate this movie so much. Up next is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. This is a movie that is despised by most of the fans of the franchise. And what I will say is this is another series that I watched every film in the franchise not that long ago, and it is a terrible franchise. The movies in this franchise are awful. Most of them are really miserable to get through and just terribly put together. But this movie is so incredibly stupid. It does not take itself seriously. The characters are over the top and dumb, but the silly, schlocky nature of the movie is what makes it so incredibly entertaining to experience. I cannot tell you the amount of times in this movie that I laughed so hard I almost cried. The plot twist at the end of the movie was such a big swing in a way that I just could not help but commend the director for taking the most dumb, ridiculous, over the top stance with this film. But it is fun. You might hate it because it's not a serious slasher movie, but none of the movies in this franchise are serious outside of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The second movie is like an overblown schlock fest that I personally think is overrated. The third film is completely unwatchable. The Matthew McConaughey film is entertaining. I actually like it because it's really over the top and dumb. And I did enjoy the remake. It's not nearly as good as the original, but I thought it was fun. But this movie, for a later installment, is silly, goofy, over the top slasher schlock that I have grown to love and appreciate. And I would actually pick this movie rewatching it over a lot of the other films in the franchise. Up next is Alien 3, and specifically Alien 3 The Assembly Cut. A lot of people hate Alien 3. They can't stand it because Aliens turned into this sci-fi schlock fest that was like military action schlock, and I don't really like Aliens all that much. I don't think it's a terrible movie, but I think it's so steers away from Ridley Scott's Alien and everything that makes it special that like there are things I like about it, but it's not a movie that I want to revisit all that often. Alien 3 The Assembly Cut is a film I really enjoy revisiting because the prison aesthetic is so dark and depressing and like tonally matches the original Alien in every single way. I feel like the hopelessness of the film really adds to the horrific violence in a way that I think is incredibly satisfying. Sigourney Weaver's performance in the film is phenomenal. I think she's like at her best in this assembly cut of the film. And sure, David Fincher like pushes this movie off. He's really upset at the creative control that he didn't get with it. There's a lot of things that he complains about that I do think are warranted. But I think like as far as the Alien franchise goes, it's a really enjoyable film in the franchise, specifically like I said, the assembly cut. The original cut isn't as good, but I do think this movie receives a lot of unnecessary hate, and it's only because people wanted more schlock like Aliens. Up next is a film I reviewed recently, so I won't go into too great detail about it, but that's Annabelle Comes Home. The Conjuring universe has spawned tons and tons of sequels, and this is one of the few that's actually really entertaining. It feels like an overblown Scooby-Doo episode. The characters are ridiculous. I love the amount of objects in the room that come to life. I feel like it gives you a really comprehensive understanding of all of the different things that the Warrens have gone up against in their ghost hunting career. There's just a lot to really appreciate about it tonally and aesthetically. I have so much fun revisiting this film, and I just did a full review of this not long ago if you want to hear my full thoughts, so I won't talk about it much more. Next is Final Destination 5. This is arguably one of my favorite films in the entire franchise because it takes a really big risk in the third act, tying it back with the other films in the franchise. But it's also got some of the most creative and entertaining kills in the entire franchise. I like the characters in this movie a lot. I feel like for a series that's essentially just introducing you people so that they can die off one by one, the movie does really the best job possible at establishing characters that you can root for or at least be entertained entertained by and appreciate as they go along. Like I said, it takes a really big swing in the third act, and I think it nails it pretty brilliantly. I have so much fun with this franchise, other than the fourth one, which is like the most miserable film ever created. But I think this is actually one of the stronger films in the franchise. And next to the third film, it's probably the one I enjoy the most. Up next is going to be the film Doctor Sleep, the Shining sequel from Mike Flanagan. A lot of people really hated this movie. And I am not 100% sure why, because I think Mike Flanagan does a brilliant job capturing everything that makes Kubrick's film special and everything that makes Stephen King's literature special. I get that the end is incredibly fan servicey, but I actually think that it works for what it's going for. I think Ewan McGregor gives a phenomenal performance in this. I think that it does a really great job with its character building. Everything leading up to the fan servicey ending is really unique and new, and there's some of the most disturbing and disheartening imagery that I've seen in a movie in this, especially surrounding violence towards children. Like, the movie really does not pull any punches, and I absolutely love it. I don't know why people had such a tepid reaction to this film. I think it's really well put together, and it's one I always look forward to visiting. And then last, this might be a little bit of a cheat because it is a prequel, but I'm going to talk about another Mike Flanagan movie, and that is Ouija: Origin of Evil. This is a prequel to the film Ouija, which is one of the worst films that I have ever seen in my life. But this movie in particular, I think, is phenomenal. It's everything that makes Mike Flanagan a special director. He does a great job building up this familial dynamic. The movie, is, in regards to its horror elements, can get incredibly hopeless and depressing, but in a way that I think is very effective. All of the performances in it are great. It's truly horrific to watch, and I just have a blast every time I revisit this, and I would highly recommend checking it out if you haven't. So what are some sequels to horror films that you think are incredibly overhated, or that get too much negative criticism? Let me know in the comments. I really enjoy all of these movies. I don't think they're all perfect by any means, but I do think they get way more hate than they need to. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.